Jacques Lacan, a French psychoanalyst, reimagined Freud's theory of psychosexual development by introducing his own structural model of the psyche, which includes the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic orders. These stages are not strictly tied to biological development, as in Freud's model, but are more about the formation of the subject through linguistic and psychological processes. Below is a detailed explanation of Lacan's 3 stages or orders. 1. The real. Definition. The real is the earliest and most primal stage, existing before language and symbolization. It is the realm of raw, unmediated experience, pure need, absence, and undifferentiated wholeness. The real is not reality as we commonly understand it, but rather the ineffable, chaotic, and unstructured dimension of existence. Key characteristics. The infant exists in a state of oneness with the world, without a sense of self or other. There is no lack, no separation, and no language to mediate experience. The real is ultimately inaccessible and can only be approached indirectly through its effects, for example trauma, anxiety, or moments of rupture. Role and development. The real is lost forever as the child enters the realm of language and the symbolic order. However, it continues to haunt the subject as a site of unfulfilled desire and traumatic impossibility. 2. The imaginary, mirror stage. Definition. The imaginary order emerges during the mirror stage, which occurs between 6 and 18 months of age. This stage is marked by the child's identification with their own image, in a mirror or through the gaze of others, leading to the formation of the ego. Key characteristics. The child begins to recognize themselves as a separate entity, distinct from the world and others. This recognition is based on an illusion or misrecognition, mechanisance, as the child identifies with an idealized, unified image of themselves that does not match their actual fragmented experience. The imaginary is the realm of images, illusions, and dual relationships, for example between the self and the other. Role and development. The mirror stage establishes the foundation of the ego, which is inherently alienated and based on a false sense of wholeness. The imaginary order persists throughout life, shaping how individuals perceive themselves and others through identification and rivalry. 3. The symbolic. Definition. The symbolic order is the realm of language, culture, and social structures. It is entered through the acquisition of language, which introduces the child to the rules, norms, and systems of meaning that govern society. Key characteristics. The symbolic is structured like a language. Lacan was influenced by structural linguistics, particularly the work of Ferdinand de Saussure. It is the domain of the law, the name of the father, a symbolic function representing authority and prohibition, and the other, the symbolic order itself. Through language, the child becomes a subject, but this subjectivity is inherently split, as language introduces lack and desire. Role and development. The symbolic order shapes the individual's identity, desires, and relationships. It introduces the Oedipus complex in a new form. The child must navigate the rules of the symbolic, e.g., prohibitions, social norms, and accept their place within the symbolic structure. The symbolic mediates the individual's relationship to the real and the imaginary, providing a framework for understanding and navigating the world. Relationship between the 3 orders. The 3 orders, real, imaginary, and symbolic, are not sequential stages in a linear development but rather interconnected dimensions of human experience. The real is the lost wholeness that can never be fully recovered. The imaginary provides a sense of self through identification, but this self is based on an illusion. The symbolic structures the individual's experience through language and culture, but it also introduces lack and desire, which drive the subject's unconscious. Key concepts in Lacan's model. Desire. Desire emerges from the gap between the real and the symbolic. It is always directed toward the other and is fundamentally insatiable. The other, the symbolic other, represents the social and linguistic structures that shape the subject's desires and identity. The phallus. In the symbolic order, the phallus is a signifier of power, lack, and desire, not a biological organ. It represents what is lost in the transition from the real to the symbolic. Summary. Lacan's three orders real, imaginary, and symbolic provide a framework for understanding the formation of the subject and the structure of the psyche. The real is the prelinguistic, chaotic dimension of existence. The imaginary is the realm of images and illusions, formed during the mirror stage. The symbolic is the domain of language, culture, and social norms, which structures the subject's identity and desires. These orders are not stages in a linear sense but overlapping and interdependent dimensions that shape human experience and subjectivity. Lacan's work emphasizes the role of language, lack, and desire in the formation of the self, offering a profound rethinking of Freudian psychoanalysis. Certainly, Lacan's concepts of the real, imaginary, and symbolic have been influential in psychoanalysis, philosophy, and cultural studies. There are examples of how these concepts can be applied to analyze works of literature, film, and art. 1. The real. Example: David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. In Mulholland Drive, the real is represented through moments of rupture, trauma, and the collapse of reality. The film's fragmented narrative and surreal imagery reflect the ineffable and chaotic nature of the real. For instance, the scene in the diner, where a character confronts a terrifying vision behind the building, can be seen as an encounter with the real and overwhelming, unsymbolizable experience that disrupts the protagonist's sense of reality. 2. The imaginary, mirror stage. Example: The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. In this novel, Dorian Gray's relationship with his portrait exemplifies the imaginary order. The portrait serves as a mirror image that reflects Dorian's idealized self, allowing him to maintain an illusion of eternal youth and beauty. However, this identification with the image leads to alienation and moral decay, as Dorian becomes increasingly disconnected from his true self. The novel explores the tension between the idealized self, imaginary, and the fragmented, hidden aspects of the psyche, real. 3. The symbolic. Example: Hamlet by William Shakespeare. In Hamlet, the symbolic order is represented by the laws, norms, and social structures of the Danish court. Hamlet's struggle to act is tied to his negotiation of the symbolic. He must navigate the demands of the law, avenging his father's murder, while confronting the limitations of language and meaning. Words, words, words. The play also explores the role of the name of the father through the ghost of Hamlet's father, who represents authority in the symbolic order. Hamlet's inability to fully integrate into this order reflects the inherent lack and desire within the symbolic. 4. Combining the real, imaginary, and symbolic. Example: Black Swan, 2010. In Black Swan, the protagonist Nina's psychological breakdown can be analyzed through Lacan's three orders. Imaginary: Nina's obsession with perfection and her identification with the role of the Swan Queen reflect the imaginary order. She strives to embody an idealized image, but this leads to alienation and self-destruction. Symbolic: The ballet company represents the symbolic order, with its rules, hierarchies, and expectations. Nina's struggle to meet these demands highlights the tension between her individual desires and the constraints of the symbolic. Real: Nina's hallucinations and physical transformations, e.g., her skin peeling, her body morphing, represent encounters with the real traumatic, unsymbolizable experiences that disrupt her sense of self and reality. 5. Art. René Magritte's The Treachery of Images. Magritte's famous painting of a pipe with the caption "Ceci n'est pas un pipe," "This is not a pipe," can be interpreted through Lacan's framework. Imaginary: The image of the pipe appeals to the viewer's sense of recognition and identification, creating an illusion of reality. Symbolic: The caption disrupts this illusion, reminding the viewer that the painting is not a real pipe but a representation. This highlights the role of language and the symbolic in shaping our understanding of reality. Real: The painting points to the gap between the object, the real pipe, and its representation, emphasizing the impossibility of fully capturing the real through images or words. 6. Literature. The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. In The Metamorphosis, Gregor Samsa's transformation into a giant insect can be analyzed through Lacan's orders. Real: Gregor's transformation represents an encounter with the real, a traumatic, inexplicable event that disrupts his sense of identity and reality. Imaginary. Gregor's attempts to maintain his human identity and relationships reflect the imaginary order, as he clings to an idealized image of himself. Symbolic. The family's rejection of Gregor and their adaptation to his transformation reflect the constraints of the symbolic order, which prioritizes social norms and economic productivity over individual identity. Summary. Lacan's concepts of the real, imaginary, and symbolic provide a powerful framework for analyzing works of art, literature, and film. These examples demonstrate how the interplay between these orders can illuminate themes of identity, desire, and the limits of representation. Whether in the fragmented narrative of Mulholland Drive, the idealized self in the Picture of Dorian Gray, or the social constraints in Hamlet, Lacan's ideas offer profound insights into the human condition.